I'm just waiting for Dennis and Hemant to give me a green signal to start. Dennis, we are 4 minutes over the clock.
Yeah, well, we can start.
Cool. So let me just pause this one for a minute and then we begin. Good afternoon once again, everyone. If you haven't noticed, I have got my coffee machine behind me. So if you guys want to go and grab your coffee, this is the time. You can grab it from my coffee machine as well. Right? Is my screen visible to you? To everyone?
Yes, Kunal.
Good. So we are going to spend next 30-35 minutes talking about data security. Right. I would be your host today. And like I said, I've got a coffee machine and some refreshments for you. So go grab your fruits, not the books, because you need to pay your attention here. And today I've got Sally as well to assist me, take some burden off my shoulders to talk when I need to grab a bottle of water. Right. So myself, Kunal, and I head the data security practice in Positka. In the previous slides, you might have seen some of the details about what do we do, who we are. Most of the details are available on our website. So Sally is one of our senior security engineers. She's an expert on data security as well. And we both will be taking you through the next few minutes on the pack which we have prepared for today. Now, the topic today is how security organizations data from modern threats, as you can see. And we specifically wanted to touch upon data security, which has been quite in the news recently, and we'll also discuss some of the breaches which has happened. So let me just take you through how the day is going to look like. Right. So yeah, that's what I have the agenda in mind. We'll do some context setting. We'll talk about why is it important to talk about data security. We'll also be taking you through some explanations, some terms, some what are the tools we normally use for data security, and then we'll also look at some use cases. And of course, I'm looking at an interactive session today, expecting some questions, some curiosity questions from all of you to understand what is data security, what tools do we use, and feel free to ask those questions. You can pause me. I'll be happy to pick up questions while I'm running this through. If you want to keep it till the end of the session, that's also fine. We have got a Q&A session lined up for you. There's another option. You can post it on the chat, and Dennis would have a look at it. I've got Dennis to assist me with moderating the call today. Dennis, you have visibility to the chat, right? Can you just pause me when there's a question?
Sure, definitely.
Okay, let's begin then. Context, right? Now, let me just begin with how a typical IT landscape looks like in a modern organization, right? They've got a lot of legacy platform. They would have got the mainframes, the AS400 servers or the Linux servers, all legacy, right? We can't leave that behind. While we have seen so many movements across the cloud infrastructure and apps, and that's an ever-growing piece, looks like everyone wants to jump into cloud. Then we also have got quite a bunch of action happening on the data and file storage, where things have been moved much beyond SAN and NAS, and now there are database services. There are SaaS platforms which offer all the database services, big data platforms like Hadoop and Cloudera. That space is also changing quite a lot. Network and mobile endpoints are another area which is the entry point for most of the hackers these days. right? And the purpose I wanted to talk about these things are with so many things happening, and of course IoT and OT devices. Now we have got even shoes and T-shirts sending data for IoT platforms, right? We have got Nike has come up with their own data-enabled shoes. So what does this all represent basically? In security language, I would say all of this represents an attack surface. Right? It represents an attack surface. Now, the question I have, which most of the organizations, leaders and the security and technology leaders face is, they have got limitation on budget, right? And if they have to spend money, how do they prioritize which attack surface to address first? Should I invest more in cloud infra, or should I first invest more into network, or where do I tighten the bolts so that my my perimeter remains secured? So if you guys are wondering, that's my son who is behind, if it is still audible. Right, so that's what is adding to the complexity. Let's look at what else is changing. So one question I parked for you was where should we focus our energy and money on? And this is the second aspect, right? That the digital transformation is changing so much, and the amount of data that is expected to grow, it's almost doubles up every year. And the way things are changing in terms of applications, they are getting more modular. Organizations are getting into microservices based platforms, which again generate a lot of data. And infrastructure, like I said, it has been changing right from on-premises to cloud, and also infrastructure as a code. Now, what does all of these things, which I have just talked to you, they are adding into? And why is that a problem for data? This arises from basically the level of complexity which has always been there associated with data, but it is more relevant in the modern context as it has always been before. First one being the volume of data which is being generated. Right? There's massive volume of data coming in. And not only that massive volume of data is coming in, it is also bringing in a lot of variety. Variety originating from not just structured and unstructured data, but also from very non-conventional sources like social media, which have not been there 10 years back much. Right? Social media, sentiments, video, graphics, all these things are now being adding up to the variety of information which needs to be processed. And last and most relevant again is the velocity. Gone are the days where people could afford, organizations could afford to spend days to solve an incident, or even wait for some incidents to surface. The speed is the key these days. So that's what is the basic context behind talking about data security, right? And this point, I would just take a pause to look at what are the critical factors. Now that's what my last few 5 minutes have been talking about, establishing the need, that why are we talking about data, and what are the critical factors to determine about my security roadmap. So I've got a small questionnaire here, not just question, just two pulse questions here, right? Grab your mouse or put your finger on a touch screen, right? I'm gonna have a question for you, and no prizes for guessing, huh? Let me start with a poll here, right? First question I have you is which assets are most vulnerable for attacks, right? Look at your own context and intelligence around yourself, and help me understand what is your understanding, which assets are most vulnerable for attack. Let me launch the poll here. Can you all see the question here? Which assets are most vulnerable to attack? You choose any of these, which you think is more relevant. We'll keep the poll open for a minute. Yeah. 5 more people to vote. Let me close it here. Another 5 seconds. Those who haven't voted. Right. So before I share the results, I'll just tell you that we will compare these results with what a security report from IBM last year they have rolled out in October 20. How does our results compare with the outcome of the study from by IBM? So 39, are you able to see the results?
Yes, Kunal, it's visible.
Right. So 39% people believe data and file servers and 35% believe endpoints. Surprised to see only 4% says cloud applications, but not very far away from what the IBM report also says. Right? Are you able to see?
Yeah.
Database and file servers are most vulnerable for attacks. And if you would notice, among all of these, cloud application infrastructure are least vulnerable for attacks. I've got one more question for you here. So now that we have seen which assets are more vulnerable for attack, let's also talk about which are the top attack vectors which are leading to a breach. I'll have another poll here starting up for this, and let's see. One, coming two, launching now. There you go. Cloud misconfigurations, compromised identity, vulnerability in third-party software, social engineering, and physical security compromise. Ten more seconds to go, people. No vote so far for physical security compromise. That's because everyone is working from home and everyone stays home. No one out there. Right. I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds now. Great. That's what the result shows. Cloud misconfigurations, 9%. Compromised identity, top rated. Social engineering, second top rated. Vulnerability in third party, top rated as well. Not far away from what the study shows. Let's just compare it with what the study shows. Compromised credentials have been the top rated one, and these numbers which you see here, right? These are the average cost of each data breach which has been caused by this particular attack vector. $4.77 million is the average cost of a data breach. And this data has been derived not from one company or two companies. This has been derived by interviews of more than 500 plus companies across the globe. Right? And of all the total attacks which were identified, this contribute 19%, this contribute 19%, and this contribute 16%. So all put together, these three vectors, compromised credentials, vulnerabilities in third party, and cloud misconfigurations amount to more than 50% of the attacks which has happened, and each one costing on the upside of $4.5 million. Right? So that's the insight I wanted to share. let's move on now. Let's talk about a data breach, right? How a data breach typically happens. So far what we have seen is what are the attack vectors and which are the most vulnerable assets which are targeted by the uh, attackers. I would hand over to Sally to talk about the data breach incidents and how a typical data breach happens. Over to you, Sally.
Hey, thanks, Kunal. Thanks for doing the first session. So I will go through the data breach in action. So move to the next slide. Yeah, so here are some examples where in news we normally say here that attacks has been increased, there ransomware attack, SolarWind attacks, and the data breach attacks. So recently we have seen the famous companies has been data has been leaked from that, like airline, Indigo airline. One is from the food chain, even the technology companies like Facebook and WhatsApp. So when we look around these data breaches, we can see millions of records has been leaked. For example, 4.5 million data records has been leaked from the airline data breach, and so on. So it's not that the technology company is secure from all these attacks. It's also part of the data breach, and we have seen it cost a lot for the company. So it's not just the leakage of the data, but it also comes under the regulatory and compliance obligation. So we have seen the cardholder data, personal information has also been leaked, and that comes under the GDPR and PCI DSS compliance regulation violation, and that also costs a lot for a company. So these are some recent news, data breach news. So we'll go through the common way how the data breach normally took place, or we have taken one example. We'll go through that. And so can we move to the next slide?
Yes, Sally. Just wanted to ask a question to our audience here. Does anyone have any thoughts or idea around how much does it cost when when a data breach happens? How much does it cost? There are two, let me just add up two more numbers here. There are two most acceptable regulatory standards when it comes to data privacy and data security: the California Act and GDPR. California Act, a data breach could cost an organization anywhere up to 750. Sorry, let me write it here. $750 per record as under the California Act. Under GDPR, it could cost them as high as 4% of their total revenue. That's the cost of data breach today. Over to you, Sally. Sorry.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, this is one of the reasons we should worry about the data breaches. Yeah, so actual data breach in action. So we have taken one example how the attacker reach and leak the data. So it's not a one-step process. It's a sequence of things attacker does, and finally it reaches to the database and got access to that. So for example, the first step is like the scanning the network and identify the vulnerabilities. So nowadays we have web application, cloud application, and data is everywhere, as we have seen in the first section of the session. So first thing is kind of scanning the network. It could be for open ports, it could be for default password or the unpatched vulnerabilities. So once we attacker get that data, the second step is finally he or she wants to get into the network. So once we find out the vulnerability, second step will be the exploiting those vulnerability to get into the network. or get the access of that endpoint or the server. So the once we are able to exploit the vulnerability. Third is we got into the network. After that, we'll crawl through the network to find out the access to the different servers which are valuable, where data has been stored. So final aim will be the uh, either encrypt the data or steal the data to the outside and move it to the outside the network and the server. So once it we can spread through the network, will get the access more and more into the network and the databases. And once we get to the database server and the login credential, the data has been moved at a very low level from the internal network to the external server. So for example, if you see one of the data breach example where the data exfiltration has done almost for 76 days and it remain undetected. So these are the steps. So at every step we'll need some preventive and detective measures to prevent from such attacks, and also if something is happening we need to detect. So for network and web application servers, we normally have the DLPs, EDRs, WAFs in place to protect and prevent that. But for database, we'll need the specific tool like the DAM or the database encryption. So even if data got get attacker got access to that database, it if it is encrypted, it's not used until and unless he got the private key, and it's almost the impossible to get the private key if it is managed with the uh, encryption tool. So in case of database security or data security, will furthermore will focus more around the data security tools like encryption, auditing, and the DLP. Yes, Kunal, you want to add more? Yeah.
So for our context today, you might have seen Sari talking about network infiltration, about web infiltration, and exploiting all the possibilities to breach the perimeter there. Our focus today would be more talking about the tools to protect the databases and data, right? How do you secure those parts? And before I just proceed, would just take a moment here to see if there is any question. No, I'll take that as an okay to proceed. So let me just now take a moment. Now you have seen that how vulnerable data is, right? And how an attacker gets to use this. Now, in this section, I just wanted to talk about what are the ways in which we protect the data, right? And what are the stages of data security strategy? What forms a good strategy, right? And I would refer to these three pillars. There have been many models. Microsoft have their own model. IBM would have their own model of data security, right? And what we have done is we have learned through all of them, and we have compiled this information to keep it simple, right? For anyone to easily understand where do they begin their journey for data security, depending on, of course, what we mentioned earlier about what to prioritize, right? And how should they go about it? In a very simple manner, as we would know, it starts with the discovery and classification of data. Now, the reason why I insist on this part to emphasize over others is we need to have just 1 second, guys. Sorry for the interruption. I'm so sorry, guys, for the interruption. Suddenly, my neighbor upstairs, they started some repair work, of course, not planned. I'm back. Are you all back now? Dennis, Hemant, are you back online?
Yeah, Kunal, we can proceed.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was just explaining to start with data discovery and classification. Now, that's an important step because organizations would have a variety of databases and data information which is being stored. Some of these could be critical and need to be governed and reported, but not all of them, right? We need to identify and prioritize which are the data which we really need to protect, which are our crown jewels, as we call it, right? And understand who should have access to what. That's where the data discovery and classification plays a role to identify, basically to identify which are the critical and sensitive information, where does this information reside, and labeling them accordingly. That's the first step. Then we talk about protecting the data. Now, once we have identified the information which needs to be protected, we need to set up enough protection around it, which will also restrict the usage. Basically, in the second step, we try to put up policies and rules in place, which will help us protect the data and also understand how that information is being used, stored, and shared. That's the second step. Now, once we have got these two things in place, that's where we should be talking about. Now that I have got this different rules and policies in place, I need to monitor them. Monitor so that any exploitation can be detected in advance, right? And I should be able to stop them before a breach actually happens. And that's where the monitoring and detection comes into play. Now, most of these tools, the data security tools, would be addressing one or more of these areas. There are tools which can do all the three. There are tools which are specific to only one of the area. Now, when we are deciding on a data security strategy or a roadmap for our organization, we should be mindful of, are the tools and my strategy and the processes, are they going to address all the three area or which particular part of this? Now, these three pillars need to be stitched around what I call as the basic fundamental of security to maintain confidentiality, which is secrecy, integrity, and availability. Integrity, just let me take a minute to explain. Integrity is basically having a confidence on the data, right? The data need to be intact, it need to be protected, and should have enough level of confidence for the data to be produced and used for making decisions. Availability, of course, the information need to be available on the time when it is mostly needed. So that's on the strategy part. Any questions here? Yes, everyone wants to keep the question for the Q&A part. No problem. We'll move on. So now that we have understood the strategy, let me take some time to explain some of the tools, right, which are available to address those three pillars which we just talked about. First one being on data discovery and classification. And when people talk about discovery and classification, the first tools which comes on their mind is having a DAM in place. DAM is basically database activity monitoring. It starts with the discovery and classification of data, and the modern DAM tools are very smart and intelligent enough to scroll through all your data sources. They can look into the traditional on-prem infrastructure or the backup and storage media, right? And they can also do this discovery on cloud. It can look into your SaaS applications like Box or Google Drive or SharePoint. It can identify what is the information stored there. They have predefined templates and labels. They can read the schema, they can read the columns and the data, and they can tell you whether it's a PII data or not, whether it's a payment data or not, whether it should be protected or not. That's what are the capabilities of DAM tool. There are more as well, but I'm talking about the first part. Then the next popular tool is DLP. Now DLP, while it says data loss prevention, but modern DLP tools, they can also do some part of the data discovery and classification. And that's why I have listed DLP here as well. Now, apart from this, the primary function of DLP is basically into monitoring the perimeter. But like I said, some of the modern tools, they can do data discovery as well. That's why I had to list it up here. On protecting, restricting, and governance, right? Encryption and masking. Now, that's a very basic protection organizations need to have, right? Encryption protects the data. Masking helps you maintain secrecy, that you don't leave, you don't need to share your data with external in the same form, right? And even if a data breach has occurred, even if the attacker has taken away your data, it will be of lesser use to them if the data is very uniquely encrypted. It also helps you in sharing the information depending on the usage. With whom are you sharing? Is the person the right recipient of the data? And you can mask and you can encrypt the data which is of not relevance to them. Identity management is another tool through which we enforce all the user access policies. Now, there are many identity tools up in the market. People have various names of calling them. So if you call them CASP, IAM, PAM, PIM, PAM. So I've just, when I say identity management, I'm combining all of them together. Backup and restore is a very time-tested and reliable way to protect your data. Now just imagine if there has been a ransomware attack, right? Or any malicious malware which has entered your environment. While you may do all the prevention and reactive controls to stop the ransomware or even remediate it, right? Backup and restore gives you the flexibility to go back to the previous point and restore your settings and data. That's what backup and restore, that's where backup and restore helps you. Endpoint protection, of course, it does help you in setting up your perimeter security. Now, most tools which we have seen earlier, like WAF or your firewall and all, they all protect you from outsider attackers, right? And it is really important to also monitor your insiders for this. And endpoint protection also helps you. They play a very important role in insider protection. So these are the popular tools for protecting and restricting. The last part about monitoring and detection, we have got again DAM tool, which helps DAM and DLP, most popular tools. They help you in monitoring and detection. They can manage user behavior. They can also trigger and establish patterns to help you monitor and detect the any anomaly behavior. I have also listed SIEM here within data security, and you might be wondering what SIEM has got to do with data security. We'll discuss in the next slide something more about how they all integrate together. But SIEM being the core of the intelligence of any security center, right? That's where all the intelligence gets into, and it builds up a lot of context. There are some brilliant use cases where the details from your DAM and DLP when fed into SIEM have given much better insight and context to the SOC analyst for triage. Any question here before I move on?
No, Kunal.
Okay, let's move on. Right. Looks like a lot of colors and pictures and boxes here, but it's a very simple representation, right? We have already talked about these tools, right? DLP, endpoint, backup. Now, all of these they work together to help you on securing the data. They help together in securing the data, right? But to have a completely robust posture, have a good posture, you need to have that wider context and intelligence, and that's where the intelligence of data security, along with the access policy from your identity management system, need to be fed into SIM so that you get much better insights to identify what type of sensitive data you are storing or transmitting. It also help you who have been using it, where is it stored, and what is happening to the data when it is not in use, and who is behind your privileged credentials for accessing the data, or when any exfiltration activity happens. So that's the complete circle, and I would say that this is a triangle for a strong data security. If you have got your data security tools feeding into SIM and combine it with your identity management solutions to give you the complete picture and a strong security posture. To help you further understand this part, in the next part, I'll just showcase you some use cases for DAM, DLP, and encryption. I have talked about many tools in the previous section here, but let me focus on these three, because these three are the basic pillar for data security. You might have many more like endpoint and all, and there are enough use cases for that. So let me just pick up this part. Just showing you here how a DAM tool helps you. What are the use cases you got to have when it comes to data security and compliance? Security, of course, we have talked about that a DAM tool can help you discover and classify. It can block suspicious activity. It can block suspicious users. It can also identify vulnerabilities on your data servers. The interesting part here is about the compliance. And if you have experienced compliance regulations, and I picked up mostly from GDPR, that they go up to a detail where GDPR says that your data monitoring tools or data security tools should be able to monitor at a very close level, not just the definition of the database or the control part, as in what data you have, who is accessing it, but it should also be able to identify what changes have been done, which have the user who have gone ahead and executed a DML command of dropping a table, for example, is the person authorized to do so. We should be able to monitor and detect those things as well. And that's where DAM tool comes into play to help you comply with your GDPR compliance. On encryption, here again, I was earlier talking about how encryption helps in securing your data. And there are various encryption approaches available these days. Masking is one, reduction is one, tokenization is one. And depending on what type of data you have, you may choose which one to go for. They're suitable for a specific type of data. Particular interest for me is to understand where to use encryption, or where to use masking, and where to use tokenization. Right? That intelligence is required so that we can apply the right set of security policies for each one of those. In terms of compliance, the encryption helps you in again blocking and quarantining the data which would have been exploited. Now, in a larger setup, all the companies and all now are into data-driven businesses, right? Where they need to share data with a lot of people, lot of different functions. Say, for example, food delivery company, for example, right? They need to share their data with their marketing team. They need to share the PII data with their channel partners, with their delivery partners, and so many people, right? And encryption helps to some extent, right? But imagine that they have to share all the data, right, which is encrypted. So they would also need to share the encryption key with them. It's same as having a lock, but at the same time, having multiple copies of the key, and you share your copy with everyone. And that's where the encryption tool need to be smart enough now to encrypt only those data which need to be protected, so that the encryption keys need not be shared with everyone. It can be used, it can be controlled with appropriate levels built up at the application level, at the table or the schema level, and also at a column level. Those things help in deciding the tool. To help you understand further, to help you understand further about what is masking, what is reduction, I just added a footnote here so that you get a view what each one of these does. And I'm just taking the example of a credit card data. Imagine it's a 16-digit credit card data. What masking will do, what reduction will do, what tokenization will do, and what encryption will do. Right? So that we understand each one of these in detail. Any question here?
And we have a question from Senthil.
Yeah, hi Senthil. Is it on the chat?
Yeah, Kunal, it's on the chat.
Who are the leading vendors for DAM, DLP, and encryption? Thanks, Senthil, for asking this question. There are many, but let me stick to those who are the Magic Quadrant leaders in each of these, because Gartner publishes this list every year for each of the security domain area. And those who appear in the leadership quadrant would have demonstrated their capability to excel in both their roadmap of adapting to the most latest things and advancements in security. Plus, they would also help you being, rest assured that things have been taken care of. So for DAM, IBM Security Guardian is considered a Guardian leader. There are, of course, a few more as well. IBM Guardian and Imperva. These are considered the top leaders in DAM. When it comes to DLP, both of these also do encryption. Huh? They are very much renowned for encryption as well. So DAM and encryption, these are the top leading tools. DLP, there are quite a lot of actions happening here with DLP merging with CASB and with SWG. And one name which comes to my mind is Netscope, which has been appearing in Gartner Quadrant for last 3-4 years consistently as a leader. And of course, there are other as well. McAfee does this very well. ForcePoint does this very well. So these are some of the tools which would appear in the Magic Quadrants for DAM, DLP, and encryption. Shall we move on?
We have another question, Kunal.
Yeah.
From Rajwal.
1 second. What specific encryption standard is being used? Like, there are multiple encryption standard, Prajwal, and those need to be applied depending on which data is more sensitive and which data is lesser. Of course, you would like to go with what the industry standard is, right? And most of these tools would comply to the industry standards in terms of encryption levels, as has been put up by the regulators. And sometimes these regulators or these standards would vary from industry to industry. Like HIPAA would have recommended something else, or PCI DSS would have recommended some other level of encryption. So these would be varying. Most tools, they do comply to those standards, and they would be able to help you remain compliant to those particular standards. We wanted to cover up the basics here, and there's a specific session I want to have in my roadmap for encryption, because encryption in itself is quite a large topic, right? You have got endpoint encryption, you got to talk about network encryption, you got to talk about cloud and containers encryption, and databases and file encryption, right? So what works for database and file encryption might not work for containers encryption and application encryption, right? All of these are different standards. So I'll park this question, and I'll invite you for my next session on data encryption, where we will spend dedicated time to talk about encryption standards, best practices, industry practices on encryption, and how to safeguard your data, how to use encryption for that. Stay tuned, keep watching our YouTube channel for all these things, and keep an eye on your inbox for the next session. I don't have a side when this will happen, but definitely I can't give you a date right now, but we will have dedicated sessions on DAM, DLP, and encryption separately. Any other question before we move on? Right. So we were talking about DAM and encryption, and last part on this series is about talking about DLP. So DLP is basically securing your access parameters, right? It has got network to protect. It has got basically your endpoint protection and intermediate layers of your web, your firewall, storage. All of these need to be protected, and that's why DLP comes in. It helps you protect your perimeter. That's a basic task what DLP does. Now, how does it help in your compliance? Because it restricts access to your sensitive data, be it your payment information or the PII data, or need to know, and it raises flags. It figures out whether the person had the authority to access the data or not, and it manages and tracks all these resources for sensitive information. Now, basic difference between DAM and DLP, and I must highlight here, is while the technologies are converging at the moment, and there are many, like I said, DAM and DLP, many functions of DAM are being now done by DLP, but by definition, DLP is more about securing a perimeter, while DAM is more about securing your data and files and their sanctity, right? To give you an example, say a user has moved a large chunk of files from folder A to folder B. What DLP can tell you is, or it can detect, is whether the person is authorized to do that change or not, right? And if the person has access to both the folders, DLP might not raise any trigger. While DAM would have the capability to look into what information was there inside the file, what that information is supposed to be shared for that user or not. And of course, DAM can then bring up all the context about this user behavior, and then can identify whether this is a risk to the organization or not. So that way, DAM is more intelligent, but at the same time, DLP is your first gateway to cross. So last part about some of the use cases. We talked about these three top attack vectors, right, earlier. So I just wanted to share some of the use cases, security policies, which will help organizations safeguard against those three vectors. For compromised credentials, keeping an eye on the activities, upload and download activities, encrypting the data. Encryption, you would see, would have appeared at multiple columns, right? Because it helps quite a lot. And frequent changes from the admin account. These are some of the ways in which the credentials can be, the compromised credentials can be pointed out. This particular part, the format preserving encryption or a non-format preserving encryption is of interest, because most of the encryption tools, while they encrypt the data, it takes them quite a lot to encrypt the format. And that's why it impacts the cloud performance and brings up the latency in your network as well. If you go too hard on encryption and just encrypt everything from data to the file structure to the format as well. And sometimes this opens up a loophole or an opportunity for the attackers to get into. So those kind of things need to be tightened when we talk about the cloud misconfiguration. And in terms of vulnerabilities in third party, again, the columnar encryption helps. Now, columnar encryption is about masking or encrypting a particular column in the entire schema of file. Another popular area to stop vulnerabilities originating from third-party software are unseen API calls, which can again be monitored with a number of tools, and from DAM to DLP, they can monitor this. So we are almost at the end of this time, and just to add up the summary of what I have taken you through, right? What we learned is among all databases and file are most vulnerable for attack. There are three pillars for data security. First one, data discovery and classification. Next one, having protection and restriction policies. Third one, monitoring and detection. When it comes to tooling, the key components of a data security posture would be DAM, DLP, encryption, backup and restore, endpoint, and identity management. Most important line to underline that to have strong SOC capabilities for data protection, you need to combine both DAM and IAM to feed into your SIEM capabilities. And last but not the least, don't take data security lightly, because data breach is gonna cost you a lot. So that's the end of my talking now. We just have a few minutes on the clock, and I am happy to pick up any Q&A. Any questions? Dinesh, do you have anything on the chat?
We have a question from Rakesh.
Currently, we need to share PII data with many internal streams. How to restrict sharing of data for specific purposes? Hey, hi Rakesh, good question. And some part of this I just shared earlier. So it always is a challenge to share sensitive data within your internal streams who might not use, might not be required to use it, right? And I was talking about having columnar encryption. So there are multiple levels in which you can restrict this, right? Starting with building up rules and policies at application level. So you can have restrictions put up on which application is requesting what data. And second one is when the data need to be shared, you can mask it, you can encrypt it, you can redact it, or you can have it shared in a tokenized form, so that you can choose whether the data leaves your premises or not. Encryption, for example, allows the data to leave from your premises to go to others' premises. While tokenization, if you apply tokenization, the data always resides with you. So you can choose any of these techniques or tools to build up those type of restrictions at application level, at data files level, and also at user level. Ramya, if you want to start data protection, where to start? Any prerequisite for that, and how Positka can help to solve the problem? Okay, 3-in-1 question, Ramya. So technically, I won't say there is any prerequisite to start, right? You just need to understand where does what data does your company hold, right? And what do you store in your premises? That's the beginning of data security, right? Having an understanding of which data do you store, how sensitive it is, with whom it is shared, where is it stored, and how is it transmitted. Are you sending the data? Do you really need to send the data? These are some of the typical questions you need to ask yourself and do as a part of the data discovery. And I'll tie it back to the 3 pillars of the security, right? That's where your answer is. And that's where the data security begins. The next thing which you ask is any prerequisite for that. Like I said, you just need an understanding of the data to begin with. And which standards do you want to apply? How Polska can help to solve the problem? We at Positka, we have strong technical and domain capabilities as well to help you on your journey towards data security. We have domain experts. Sally is one of our domain experts who can help you understand, do all this data classification and can come up with what controls and what level of tightening you need for your data security posture. The standards might tell you a lot of things to do, right? But those need to be stitched together with your business context, the type of data you handle, your people are using, which applications do you use, right? And that's a tricky question to answer, and that's where our expertise comes in. We help you understand to what extent the controls need to be applied, which security policy need to be very hardened, and which ones you need to focus on more than others, right? That prioritization is something which can help you. We also have expertise, technical expertise on the tools, which we can help you getting the best out of those tools like DAM, DLP, or an SWG or an EDR. We can help you set up all of these and can help you in integrating those together with your other tools like Splunk or QRadar or any of your SIEM tools to help you get that insight and build up the context. That's how I would say Poisa can help you in setting up your security posture. I see there's one more question from Abhishek. Can we do encryption for the cloud? Yes, Abhishek, the modern tools, they do cloud encryption, and even the clouds have their native tools which can help you do all this encryption and all. Now, where these third-party tools like Guardium or Impava or Netscope kind of tools will help you in doing things beyond just what your native clouds will do, right? Imagine you got a multi-cloud environment, right, where you would have a GCP or a private cloud or your Azure and all of those put together, right? And you would like to have encryption and key management for all of them, right? You can do that all individually with the help of the native capabilities and services, but you need to have a centralized way of doing it where you as an organization have control over your keys, over your tokens for encryption. And these are all the tools which I just mentioned. They can very well do cloud encryption and container encryption as well. One more. What are the benefits of DAM over DLP or EDR? I was trying to explain this with the example, right? DLP helps you secure your perimeter, like network or your media, like storage or web or your endpoint devices, right? You can help secure all of them using a DLP, so that you would know which resources they should have access to, and if they don't have access to, then it should block them, and it should trigger an alert. That's what typically DLP or an EDR will do. What they would not be able to do is read through the context, right, or the file, and give you that insight, which is at a very low level detail about what data was said or what changes a person has done into a file structure. That's what DAM can do. So DLP or EDR can stop a person from accessing and opening a file, while DAM can stop you from making changes to it. You can't run a command if you are not authorized to run that. And that's the insight and context which DAM brings over and above the DLP and EDR. Does that answer? Good. So we are 5 minutes above the call, above the clock on this, and I must say thank you everyone for your time. If there are no more questions, then we can close this session. And I'm happy to address your query. If you have any, you may post it to me. You can get in touch to me or say Ali on these on our email IDs showing up here on the screen. Right, I will be more than happy to connect to you and resolve your query related to data security or any of the security tools which you would need help with. Okay, goodbye everyone. Speak to you again. Thank you.
Thanks for the session, Kunal.
Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kunal.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Kunal. Thanks, everybody.